Right. All right, I'll just do sound check. Okay. Yeah, no, it sounds like an email. Okay, bye. Sorry guys, it looks like we just had a little bit of a technical problem there, but hopefully it is resolved. I might again get you just to pop your hands up if you can hear me, and we might make a start again if that's cool. We've only lost 10 minutes, but I'll make sure we get through. Just, yeah, looks like we've got lots of hands now, so all good. Apologise for whatever that was going on there, but looks like we're okay. All right, I'm going to start again. Okay, just a few reminders for our webinar today. We're going to be using test systems, and the systems that we're going to be using is branded for FAST, but choice and plan are the same, so don't worry about that. We're also going to be using general scenarios in today's webinar. The primary focus of our webinar is about podium input, but there'll be some other contextual information that I talk about that may be of assistance to you. There's a question function there, which I saw you're all using, telling me you can't see and hear anything, so we know that that's working. If you could use that function to pop your questions through, and at various stages through the webinar, I will pop over there and have a look at some of those questions, answer what I can. I may not get to all of them today, but we will certainly send them all the questions and answers out to everyone post webinar. Please keep your questions on topic. Just a quick one I will answer now that we always get questions throughout the webinars is yes, there are CPD points for today's webinar. The other thing there is the COVID-19. I put that up because of all the restrictions, we are not on business premises, but I've found what I was hoping is the best location I can and quietest to provide the webinar. So bear with me if there's a little bit of background noise here and there, but hopefully there won't be too much. Today's goals will be to become familiar with creating a self-employed client record in Podium, become familiar with creating a company record in Podium, using case studies, understand how to create applications for both of these types of entities within Podium for lodgement. So we'll work through not all of the process checklists, but we'll talk about some aspects of the process checklist that relate to self-employed and companies and what you may need to do in there. We'll also clarify what resources are available to assist you. Okay, in terms of context for today, you'll obviously hear the webinar, but when you finish the webinar and you're sort of reconciling the education you've learned today, you can also go across to Podium Knowledge and reference some other videos. So the Sarah Buckman video series is going to be very helpful in terms of contextually. There's a lot of processing activities and education in there that applies to self-employed and company borrowers as well. So there's a create lead client application and then also the process checklist for Sarah Buckman. So make sure you have a look at those. 2 weeks ago, we ran creating applications for trust clients. Again, that's quite relevant to what we're doing today. So tie both of those in, and that will be very helpful for you. There's also, you can see on that image we've got on the right-hand side, sorry, Podium Academy recorded training sessions. The learn to develop business efficiencies with activities. That's going to be a really helpful thing for any clients, leads, applications you put into Podium. And we've also got articles, many articles, but a couple of important ones for you is going to be joint borrowers and adding non-borrowing contacts. Also the loan modelling tool, which some of you may know about, some of you may not. It's a new addition, probably a couple of months ago. So I will show you that as well, and that's sort of preliminary product search, servicing, loan worksheet and simulation and comparison. So you can put information in there before you actually create any entities. I'll show you that within Podium before we start on our case studies. In terms of guidance, for before beginning self-employed and company clients and applications, it's really important that you understand your client's business. Take the time. It's not just about getting figures and putting them into Podium. You really have to understand the structure. So who's who in the zoo in terms of the business, what their roles are, and then the revenue versus expenses, particularly analysing trends, variations and discrepancies. So is income and expenses going up or down from year to year? And it leads us into the next part, is calculating income and making sure that your calculations of income are in the best interest of the client. So even though, for instance, a lender's policy might be to take 120% of the previous year, if the most current year is downward trend, then maybe you need to apply a little bit more thinking to the calculation of income there. Some of the things you need to look at, whether they're taking a straight salary and dividends, either stock and stock options, salary and an annual bonus, or an agreement to pay later. So there's some of the ways in which self-employed clients can take income. But realistically, you've also got to think how they pay themselves now to meet new mortgage repayments may be different to how they've been paid in the past, or how much they've been paid in the past. So if that is the case, if there is a change in the way the owner takes income out of the business, then make sure your notes cover that off so that you can provide a reasonable education for the lender when they're looking at the income figures and the trading figures that you've provided them. The other thing is know your lender's policy. So understand how lenders treat income and expenses, LVRs, all that sort of stuff. So a couple of examples might be the lowest of income figures for the last 2 years. They might take the most recent year, an average of 2 years. As I said before, 120% of all of recent year, or not all add backs are used by lenders. So it's really important that you get to know the lender policies, particularly about income and expenses. Contact the lender BDM and or your aggregator PM if you need guidance in terms of policy structures and assessment. In terms of policies and assessment, I will show you a bit later too. In the Podium library is where you'll find all the lenders and their policies. Also in the product search functionality, which I will show you today, you can get an overview of features and benefits and policies relating to particular products. So it's important that with these type of clients where there are more risk assessments taken into account, that you do stay in touch with your BDM and AgPM to work through these applications. The final thing here is to add notes into Podium to explain income calculations. So it might be either what add backs you've used or why you haven't used them, or even a percentage of income or expenses. So again, probably the worst thing for a lender is to receive data through for an application and not understand where the figures have been derived from. So it's equally important for you, to work out what that income is and what those figures are, but communicate that with your lender so that they can know exactly what you've assessed, because they're relying on you, the broker, who's met with the client and taken advice on either from an accountant or from the principals as to what the income, how it's derived and what's actually happening in the business. So put your notes in Podium and explain the income calculations to the lender. All right, so what we'll do, the first one we're going to look at is from our self-employed, and I've got a fairly long PowerPoint presentation here which walks through step by step of the different aspects I guess you have to consider and do when putting in self-employed and company. I'm not going to walk through all of that today. I'm going to more demonstrate it within Podium, but I may refer back to these case studies just for a bit of contextual or to summarize something. So our first case study relates to self-employed borrower. So that's Cameron Franklin, and he's a sole trader for Franklin Plumbing. So just to give you a bit of context on where we're heading, he's a plumber since leaving school. He's self-employed since 2014 as a sole trader. He's single, currently rents in Parramatta. There's his assets, liabilities. He's looking to buy his first owner-occupied property in Blacktown for 600. He's looking to borrow 400. A loan products, he wants a variable P&I over 30 years, additional repayments, major bank to support his ongoing business finance. So again, that's a requirement that he has, which may, out of your 35 odd lenders that you might be able to choose from, his requirement in this case, and often a lot of clients have these sort of requests where they want only a segment of the lenders available to them. So it's important that we document that in our application. So what will we be doing? We'll be creating a client record for Cameron Franklin. I'll briefly walk through or talk through the lead conversion process. In terms of if you are using the lead function and you're not quite, or you want to use the lead function, you're not quite across it, the Sarah Buckman create lead and convert to client is 2 videos that are really helpful in determining what steps you've got to take from the lead through to client. So we'll create that client record. We'll add assets, liabilities, and expenses. We'll add self-employed income. Create an application for Cameron Franklin to purchase the owner-occupied property. Some of the things there, like add assets and liabilities and expenses, I won't necessarily go into too much detail because it's more about the income. So let us get started on our journey with this self-employed client. So what I would normally do if I am starting off and I wanted to use leads, I can jump into the More tab and then come up to leads. When I'm putting a lead in, it doesn't necessarily, and I'll just show you the new input screen. It's individual or company. So let's just forget the company part for the moment. And that's probably but a good point to start out that if you're self-employed, if they're a self-employed borrower, the self-employed entity might be a sole trader, partnership, or a company, but the borrower for what we're doing is an individual. So it's an individual that we're looking at. If the borrower is actually a company, and that might be, which is in line with our case study later, is a company borrowing for investment purposes, then that's where you go down the company lead part. I wouldn't necessarily, my advice probably to you all here is don't use, if it's a company borrower, don't put in a company lead, put it in as the principal, who is your main contact for that particular company. So put it in as individual. When you convert across to a client, then you create the company entity from there. Okay, so what we do, individual lead. Now I'm just going to high level show you the screens here, but you'll see that there's nothing here in here that we'll talk about. So we've obviously got our mandatory fields that we've got to complete. There's nothing here that identifies whether my client is self-employed. And that's, sorry, just there, sorry, I'm stand corrected. That's the only thing that identifies it. I don't put any income or anything in here at this point. I've got my self-employed status there. Not all, when you're filling out leads, not all brokers fill all this sort of stuff out. If you're thoroughly putting it in, then you will go through. But that's the only thing, sorry, that does identify at this stage. Other than that, we're just creating an entity. And this in this stage is going to be Cameron Franklin. So I'm not going to create this. What I'm going to do is actually, they would go to a lead, and then when I open the lead record, on the top right hand corner we'll have convert. and it converts them across to a client. I'm going to go to I've already created a client for Cameron Franklin, a client record, and there he is. So what I'll do is once I've converted the lead, it'll open up into this record. So I've got my personal client details there for Cameron Franklin. And we'll just scroll through. The details tab basically is everything I've just input in terms of creating the client record. So there's nothing really here. You'll notice a description. This is where I put down all the details that I have gathered so far about the client. If I want to do something really extensive, then I would create a note and capture more of the information. But it's really important that the description, particularly when you've got other people in your business handling the client records, that they also get to understand what exactly is the background for this client. I'm just doing a little bit of scrolling down. Through here, household, so he's single, residence, I'll fill all that out, and assets and liabilities, they've come across from the next page, which if you're only at creating the client record, it wouldn't have already come through. Okay, what I would do then is click on the, sorry, I'll just show you while I'm here. Up in the top right-hand corner is new note. So if I wanted to put a note with all the description for the client, or more extensive, I would click on a new note, and then the new note would pop up and away I go. And I just type it in as background information for Cameron Franklin or Franklin Plumbing, and keep it in there as a note, which you'll find would get stored in the bottom part of the related tab here, which when it opens up, everything's just coming through. So as I said, I've pre-populated all this information, so it's there for you, but it would be blank normally, and you would then have to go in and put that information in. Just going to scroll down here, and down the bottom here is where you can see the notes tab there. There's one note, so I've already put a note in about the income notes for Franklin. I'll talk about that when we get to the adding income stage of what we're doing. Okay, now just coming back up to the top here, I would input an address. I'm not going to show you how to do that. That's just Cameron Franklin's personal address. He's renting at the moment. I'm going to do assets, liabilities, and expenses. Then I'm going to come back to income. In terms of assets, now, obviously, just for a normal PAYG, you can put in the savings, super contents, the motor vehicle, all that sort of stuff. But for self-employed, it's worth putting in the value of the business, and how the lender treats that value in terms of their analysis is up to them. But what I've got here is equity, business equity for Franklin Plumbing. And the way I've created this, I'm not going to go through and edit it. I'm just going to show you if I'm putting in the new asset. So the asset type will be other. I will just call it, what I would have done in this case is call it Franklin Plumbing. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the type here is business equity. And I think it's really important that where there is value, and we have to be a little bit realistic about this, because there are calculations in terms of business equity. But if you wanted to just look at it simply as assets and liabilities and the discrepancy, so being the net worth, that's probably a starting point. But there's a whole lot of other considerations that come into it as well. But if you wanted to put a value in for the business, then you do it in through business equity. The value, the basis, whether it's an estimate or they have a certified valuation for it, valuation date and details, you can put in there. So I would just put in there that if it's the net worth, current net worth of the business, or some other calculation, you can do that. And you just hit save. And therefore you end up with another asset type, Franklin Plumbing, which is the the business equity. Now, the other part here is in liabilities. You'll notice here there's an ANZ credit card for Franklin, Cameron Franklin, but I've also got a bank guarantee, and I'll explain what this is. So again, rather than edit it, I'll go into new liability. And what I've done here, I could put in Franklin Plumbing, and the type is a contingent liability. And a contingent liability is a guarantee. So there is no liability at the moment, but there may be a liability. And it's where the director or a security provider has provided security for business facilities. So we do contingent liability. We can pick our related asset. So we go straight down to Franklin Plumbing. So we're actually saying the contingent liability relates to Franklin Plumbing. We've already got a value on that. And then we can go through and complete the rest, who the bank lender is for Franklin Plumbing, et cetera, where there's limits, all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to cancel out of that. And that's how we get our business, our bank guarantee. The liability could be just for an overdraft, 50 grand. And there could be alternate security for it. So it's up to you to work out how that fits into this equation. But it's worth putting both of those into this scenario so that you can provide the lender with a little bit more information. Don't just necessarily discount the company as a nil value or separate, deal with that somewhere else, because you know the self-employed applicant has a vested interest and equity in that particular entity. All right, let's just have a quick look at living expenses. Again, I'm just going to highlight this one. So we just go through new expense, how I've added all of these. So again, I'm not going to, at this point, I'm not going to add any business expenses into here. I may well put comments in that certain things are covered by business, for example, phones, insurance, things like that. So I would not put them in the expenses part, but make a note about that. Just waiting for this to populate. I'll just give it a little bit longer and we might just pop out of it and I'll just talk through what I've got. Looks like it's just frozen on me a little bit, just bear with me. This looks like there's a little bit of connectivity. No, there we go. So what I would normally do for the borrower, Cameron Franklin, is put down all of their normal expenses as a person, and things like transport, phone line and online subscriptions, or even insurances. Just a little bit further down, they might be taken care of or put through the business. So without putting anything there, or you could put a $0 there and put some comments. That might be worthwhile as well. And then obviously save. If there's multiple insurances, you just keep adding add item and it adds it to that category. Again, it's probably worth putting a note in there as well if some of the personal expenses are absorbed by their self-employed business, which means that they've got potentially a little bit more capacity for borrowing. A couple of things here. I've created the application already, but I'll come back to that because we'll do that in a separate step. I'll demonstrate how to do that. There's not too much more at this particular point we need to do down. The relationships, they're more the next of kin relationships, so they're not professional relationships, so we don't need to put anything in there at this particular point. Any files that I've got, I can upload into the client record. I've got one in there, let's say image of the property that he's currently renting. Whether or not you want to do that, that's up to you. And obviously my notes are there. Just on notes, it's really important that rather than just doing one big spiel about everything, that you break your notes up a bit so that when you're reading them, and you might read them a year, 2 years, 3 years later, it makes it easier to find information rather than just having one huge big note that covers everything and takes 10 minutes to read. You might just break it up into a couple of different notes so it's easier to locate information. I might just take it, well, no, actually, I'll leave that because it is related to income, and I'll show you that in a moment. All right, let's pop ourselves back up to income. In here, I've got self-employment income. So I've already added that, but I'm going to pop in here, new income, and we'll work through how we add income for this business. So remember, this is a self-employed applicant, Cameron Franklin. He might well have Cameron Franklin Proprietary Limited as a company. It doesn't mean that it's got to be a company application. It's still going to be the same figures that go in, and you'll see in a moment once we've identified the income type that it is. So it's self-employed, and I've clicked on self-employed, so then all the self-employed fields pop up there. So I'll complete them, but I've already created it. So when we get across into the records completed, you'll see how it sort of comes through. Employment type, pick trader, company or partnership. It's a primary employment. It may well be a secondary income. So in that case, we might just go sole trader, but it could be a secondary income. They could have PAYG for their first and then run a side business that's been going for a couple of years, which the lender may well accept as income. So again, previous employment or secondary employment. So it's worth looking at recording those in there as well. Industry, pick whatever industry it is. We'll just call them labourers. Start date. And as we move down here, now a couple of things here. We have to firstly pick our most recent year. So we'll say this will be it because you know, they're going to be interim if they're not. So we put through our sales. I've already got these figures in, but I'm just going to put in some random figures there. I think I'll put in probably too many. Yeah. Cost of goods sold. Now, part of this is too, and when I said get to know the business, is understanding not just what these figures are, but what they actually mean. So it's a little bit of education on company trading or business trading. So your sales less cost of goods sold then gives you, you take off your operating expenses and end up with your taxable income. From a lending perspective, you add your add backs in, and then that's all seen as potential income that the client can use for servicing the home loan. Just putting a couple of figures in here. Operating expenses might be just running up. Security, super guarantee, non-recurring income, and taxation. So put your tax in there. What will actually happen is that the tax automatically calculates for the most current year. But if you want to override that, so I can't edit that at the moment. If I want to override it, similar to the incomes for PAYG, then you can tick that box and make your adjustments that way. As we scroll down, we put our business name. It's important here, ABN and ACN, if they don't have them right, you can't proceed, it won't save. So if you don't know what they are, or if they are incorrect, leave them blank, add them in a bit later. Contact names is obvious for these. And that's sort of where you end up with your self-employed income. Now, a little trick here, I feel like it's a trick. If you are dealing with a business that only has one year, then what a lot of brokers are doing, and they've got to communicate this obviously with the lender. And in terms of the assessment is if they've only got 1 year, and it might be this year, then they just replicate this year in here. So if there is an averaging of income, it'll average out to the same as the 1 year. But you do have to explain. There might be other ways that you might want to get around it, if you like, but it won't accept with just the 1 year. So duplicate the prior year if it's only 1 year's figures you've got, but please make a note in the system as to that's why you've entered it that way, and there truly is only the 1 year available. And then that's about it. I would normally hit save there, and then I end up with my self-employed income. Sorry, let me just go back. I did not cover off. Let's come down here. Scroll back up, a little bit temperamental. I didn't cover off on the add back. So if I have any add backs that I want to enter in here, I click on the field there, and sorry, that will open up the add backs field, and away I go. Couple of things, these are really important, particularly things like non-reoccurring expenses. So and they're one-off expenses within the business, and they could be, for instance, cyaniding on vehicles, or branding for the business, new marketing material. It's just a once-off. Could be an office fit out, could be all sorts of stuff, but you really have to make sure you have notes on those sort of things. Interest, depreciation, they're all fairly straightforward in terms of where they're add back. So you're adding interest back because the business has lending facilities that you need to take into account for business borrowing. So we're probably dabbling a little bit more into credit advice here. So I'd be talking to, there's a couple of points here, or a couple of actions that you need to take in terms of getting assistance. Probably one of the best is from your peers. So brokers who have had a lot of experience with self-employed and can give you some guidance on this, these sort of credit-related matters. So it's important that you do form up your networks and can get some leverage on education through your peers. There is lender BDMs that can help you, not just tell you what their policies are, but some of them are quite experienced in self-employed and company borrowings from previous history in banks or as brokers. Likewise with partnership managers, they could be of assistance to you. But it's probably your peers are probably the best source of, or mentors are the best source of education in terms of what are the figures I can use, what do they mean, and what other considerations do I have to take into account. So what I've done now, I have entered self-employed income. I've got my assets, liabilities, and expenses. In terms, there's nothing else really for me to do in terms of this client record and our case study at the moment. You might want to put some more information in. Sorry, I did say I would show you the note down the bottom. So I'm just going to open up the note, and I've just got income notes for Franklin Plumbing. I'm not going to sit here and keep it open for you to read, but basically I'm talking about an increase between financial years in the figures that I've used, and why it's happened, percentages, and there's a non-recurring expense there as an add back, writing off 2 vehicles. So I've covered off all the information I need to in terms of how I've calculated that income. And it's on record, so if I need to get that information to the lender, then I can do that. What I might do is just quickly have a pause before I break into the application part of this. I might just quickly have a look at some questions if they're Unfortunately, there was a lot of questions there about the audio dropping out, so I'm just there was still the majority of the questions are still relating to, in fact, they all are. So, yeah, a couple of quick questions on slides. Yeah, you will, as I said, you will get a copy of the slides as we go, after we finish post-webinar, together with all the questions. All right, so our client record's complete. We have all our assets, liabilities, expenses, income in there. We've got an address we've put in there. And now we're now ready to create our application. So let me just pop back across to our PowerPoint. We'll just recap on what I'm going to flick through a lot of slides here, but you'll get a copy of this as step by step how to enter the information in. There's our notes section. Emails, new tasks, new appointment follow-up, and log a call, all really important stuff in terms of your activities with your clients, particularly things like log a call and follow-ups where you're following up the accountant. I know there's brokers that are sort of a bit cautious about contacting accountants because the accountant may then get wind that there's an application and maybe even refer the client to their broker. But I think they're one of those things that you've just got to bite the bullet on and invest in your own personal or your own professionalism, and give the accountant confidence that you are looking after the client, and they're the ones that'll have a lot of the information in terms of structure and probably some background information for you. Certainly the principals of the business will have information on what's happening currently in the business, what's happened in the past. So I think you've just got to tie up the two of them. So remember to do your emails and logger calls and follow-ups, particularly around professional entities that you deal with. Okay, so let's just have a recap quickly of what Cameron's looking at. He wants to buy for 600 in Blacktown. He's looking to borrow 400. Loan and product requirements have variable interest rate, P&I repayments over 30 years, additional repayments, then wants a major bank to support him. So with that, we can make a skip back across. Now I've already created that application. We'll get to that in a moment, but I'll show you again, new application, because we do have a lot of brokers online that are relatively new to Podium. So for those of you who have or are familiar with it, just bear with us a little bit as we go through. Residential loan. Now, one of the, as I've always spoken about with our Podium training for application creation, is that we put in application name. We have a naming convention for our applications that exists within our business. So no matter who the client is, every application that is done in the business has a certain style to the naming convention. So it actually will tell me, the broker, and everyone else a summary of the transaction. Just bear with me as I go through this. Sorry. And then again, if I have been directed only to one lender, then I can obviously put that in there. At this stage, I wouldn't know the lender. So what I will actually do is come back and add to the application name once I know who the lender is. So that it's just a recommended naming convention. So Franklin, purchase of an owner occupied at Blacktown, and that's telling me what the security property is, the loan amount and the date when it was done, and eventually the lender. It's not saying that this is the best way. You just make your own convention for your own business, so that make sure all your applications have the same convention, so you know what you're looking at when you're looking at reports for applications, and even when you're jumping back into a client record a couple of years later, you can tell instantly from the application that's what happened. Client status, so We might go discovery, and I'm compiling it at the moment. Primary purpose is a purchase. Just remember, if they are buying an investment property, it's still a purchase. It's not an investment, so it's still purchase. The use of the property is investment, but the transaction is a purchase. Settlement date, I'll just pluck one out for in June sometime. That's good enough. I can put in lead source, so existing contact. Search my, sorry, too many fingers. So that's who referred it to me, tied it up there. I don't have to put in probability, all that sort of stuff. Finance due date, it's just market pressure. Put a description in of the application, so just looking to buy owner occupied property for long-term family home, whatever it may be. Valuation amount, valuation date, I can do all those. Amount required, 400. And there's not a lot of other things there I need to fill in. So I just go normally, I just go save, and away I go. And I end up with an application record. So I'll just pop up in a moment. Just bear with me. And I end up with our application record. So again, the details page, discovery was the initial status that I put it on, and you'll see that the sub status is being compiled. If I want to keep changing that, so the statuses are these ones here, but the sub status is the next level of delivery. So where in the discovery status is the actual file at. So that's how you can maneuver it through. Once you've completed all of those, you can move it to submitted, whatever you need to. The details page again just covers off on everything that I've just input in terms of creating, that application record. You see there's a description in there, loan amount, and that's pretty much it. So that's what the details page covers. In terms of the related page, so I've already put in a lot of these details. But I'll show you how we can add to them. So our borrower connection, because he was the borrower, obviously he is the one listed at the moment. If I wanted to add another borrower, so if I'm adding a borrower, and you'll see that a borrower is either borrower or guarantor, they've already got to be created within the system. I can't just create them from here. So new borrower, and I find who that client might be. And this is just for demonstration. And I might say Cade Walker's the guarantor. Yeah, and then I can just go save. So what will happen now is in the borrower connections, Cade Walker's going to turn up there, and he's listed as a guarantor. Again, all his information's already in there, his assets, his liabilities, all that sort of stuff. So that's how you add other borrower connections. Related party connections. So these are important, particularly in terms of self-employed. So a new related party connection, I'm going to put in here, it might be an accountant, but I could do somebody you've already got in here, Henry Takatui, and he is the solicitor. Now, for this to occur, Henry Takatui needs to be in the business, in my database, sorry, as a contact. I know we're probably not going to, it wasn't part of what we're going to run through today, but I might just do a little quick run through. But you'll see by saving it that Henry Takatui then becomes a new related party connection here for this application. He's a solicitor. I might want to add the accountant. He's probably the first one. Just in terms of adding people or contacts, so Henry Takatui is a contact. Let me just I've just done a right click on here and I'm going to open in a new tab. It'll open up here for me. I'll get a list of all the clients, and what we've actually got to do is create what we call master list. So what I would do, you'll see here, I've got an accountant master list here. I've also got other ones that I've created. Now, one of the things, and I'll talk about this a little bit with the company, if it was a bigger company, for example, let's say Franklin Investments was a bigger company and there was a couple of employees that were actually customers of mine as a broker, what I could do is have a Franklin Investments master list or an employee master list. So what I do is then put the contacts in there, and then I can link those contacts to the company or to the self-employed. So that's an important thing, but it's creating a master list. So that master list is actually known as, and it's in the client tab, an account connection. And what that actually does is it actually creates it's like a mini database, and where, for example, that accountant master list there is an account connection that enables all accountants in my database that are my contacts to sit there, and then I can link any of those accountants to customers as I get them. So if I was getting referrals from, say, 3 accountants, then I can have those accountants in the accountant master list, and as I get clients through that have been referred from either of them or any of them, I simply just link them through to that particular master list. There's probably a couple of other ones here. I've got master list there. There's a builder master list as well that I've created. So you can have a real estate master list, solicitor master list, all of those things where you can house all your accountants, all your builders or solicitors. If we go into Podium Knowledge Hub, adding a non-borrowing entity such as a contact, there's an article that shows you how to do that. That's a really important thing, particularly where you're linked in with accountants and solicitors. Sorry to divert a little bit there, but that's how I've got Henry Takatui linked in. If I didn't have him in the database as a contact, I couldn't link him, because you can't link a client to a client. It's got to be a contact to a client, because if you want a client to be linked to it, you're bringing in across as a borrower, which means all their assets and liabilities, income, expenses come across. Whereas if you're linking a client, only their contact information is coming across, because that's all that's relevant to this particular client. As we scroll down, you'll see the assets and liabilities have come through from the client record, Franklin Plumbing, business equity, and then also the bank guarantee that he's provided, 50,000. So even though a security property isn't used for that, he's still liable. It's still something that he may need to pay for one day. We've got our self-employed income here, our expenses, our products. Now, products have already been selected because I've worked through and recommended scenarios. I've worked through the process checklist, which is the next part that I'm going to pop into. Now, I'm going to work through a couple of these here. Not all of them are going to be particularly or are all relevant or need to be called out. Again, I'm going to refer you to the Sarah Buckman video series for the process checklist, in which in some detail I walk through each of these particular milestones, which is the recommended regulatory process. I walk through each of those milestones showing you how to complete. But some of the things that we need to look at here, I'm just going to go into client needs. Just let that one pop up. It should just take a second. So all the standard information from broker settings comes through there, our financials. Now, this is an important part because we need to do an eye check on this. So all our incomes come through, self-employed for both years. and then all the add backs as well. So it's important that we make sure that all of these figures are correct and come through and give us our subtotal and our income figures. If there's any rental income, we can pop in there. We've got our liabilities. Now, we can if we want. So we haven't selected a product yet, but if we've done the loan modeling tool, for example, we might know what a repayment's going to be on this loan amount. So we can pop that in there if we like, because if we scroll down further, what you'll see is that there's no repayments for the proposed loan. So what the future net monthly surplus is without a repayment coming out. Now, if I wanted to put the repayment in, I might put the repayment in, and then what you'll see is then that comes out now. So that's gone down by $3,000 and that's gone up by 3. You don't need to do that, but you can use this scenario here, given that you're happy with all of the expenses and income above, as a quick and dirty servicing sort of scenario. But I'm just keeping that as naught, and I'm just eye checking all of that. So there's all your standard financial security questions there. Have you taken financial advice, all that sort of stuff. Now, in terms of verification, let's get rid of PAYG. We've got our self-employed and I've ticked off our recent income. So it's important, again, align up with what your lender's documentation requirements are, and tick them off and put some comments in there if you need to, if you've collected anything else. So it might be 12 monthly forecast or a business plan or something like that. So just know that the self-employed checklist for verification is there as well. Requirements and objectives. Assist purchase a owner-occupied home at Blacktown for 600. Want a major bank. I put naught there because there's no dollar figure on it, it's just a requirement. 400, 30 years, explanation. So all the standard sort of stuff that you would for a normal PAYG. And loan features I've completed there. And go down in here into preferred loan types and all the other loan features and benefits. So not a lot different there. Remember, if I want to add more to a C&A to this document, I print Word, put in my additions, save it straight away as a PDF. If I'm happy with this, the data I put in there, I just go print PDF straight away. Both options will put a copy of this in your file section of the application. Product search is our next one. There's a couple of points here I wanted to highlight to you. So you didn't have to jump off into the library to have a look at the lender policies. We'll pop up here. We should have 4 there or 2 or something. 3, yeah. So this is the standard boilerplate sort of scenario that comes up. Put the loan amount and make adjustments where you have to. New South Wales, P&I, owner-occupied, bulldog, and variable. And that's got me covered. I can then pick, they only wanted major, so I get rid of all, then pick ANZ, CommBank, we've got Westpac, just here we've got the Money NAB. 4 selected, do my search, all the products will come up there. I have to put in there if there's anything else, so they wanted split, redraw, additional payments, all that sort of stuff. Do my search, add them to the product shortlist, and I've already added 3 over here. So again, what I'm going to do is have a look at those in a moment. I do want to go back to product search, sorry, and go into advanced filters. So what advanced filters are going to do is tell me more about loan details that they want, features and benefits, acceptable securities, acceptable income. So again, this is telling me what's essential, particularly around self-employed here. Okay, so that was in the advanced filters part just there. Shortlist. What I want to do is compare these three initially just in terms of product specs. So view product details. I'll get them side by side here. And what I'm going to do is scroll down further. So there's a little bit to scroll down, but you'll see where I'm going. So we're getting into family pledge. There's borrowers for a company, and borrowers for trust. But I want to get into income down the bottom here. These are company and borrower trust fee. We'll cover that in a moment. Acceptable securities, and then down the bottom here we've got acceptable income. So we'll get there. And self-employed. Listed. This is what the lenders give us. So it's not sort of what we've deciphered from their products, or this is what the lenders give us. So if you are looking at self-employed or company, it's important to just have a quick read through here. That's a quick insight into whether this lender is suitable, particularly in terms of income calculations. So make sure you take the time to just have a look and see. Eventually, when you do a couple of self-employeds, you'll know which lenders that policies are suitable to which clients. But that again, sorry, I'll just take that one. I'll take that one back up the top here. That was simply just clicking all of those there and then view product details. I've already got them saved, so I'm just going to pop out. I'm not going to follow this part. So while I've got you, don't think that's not in line with the recommended regulatory process. So this is it here as we go through. So that other one was a little bit out of order. We do simulation and comparison. Again, it's important to go through the process to select our preferred and recommended, and particularly work out in terms of costs, interest and fees, which is the more financially suitable, if you like. This will certainly give you, in terms of overall cost, and we might have selected preferred for that one, but there may be other circumstances there, particularly around a business banking requirement of the customer. So it might mean that you select another one for that one. Okay, we won't go through loan worksheet. Serviceability assessment. Now this is, I wouldn't say it's a little bit tricky, but you do have to be double checking in this area, because not all ADBACs, in past ADBACs haven't really come through into serviceability. We've done a recent fix on it, and we believe we've got it right, but it's still prudent to make that check through. So you've got your self-employed income. You can add the security in here if you want. I've got the bank guarantee in there as well. If for some reason you want to take that out of the servicing equation, then you'll need to take it out of the client liability section. But it's important that when you do your assessment, that you check that all your ADBACs have come through or flowed through. Now, what's in here and the analysis of the income is based on the lender that's been selected. Again, so because there is quite a wide variation in self-employed servicing calculators across the lenders, you need to be familiar with what the outputs of that are going to be. When we go through, I'm just going to give this one a click. Hopefully we got a pass. Yes, we did. Now, one of the things that we need to, if you want to do a real good check on this, is you go to print and go to comprehensive PDF. We'll open and we can scroll down and have a better analysis of what there's three pages there. So particularly here, so we can see here that the add backs have been taken into account. So we're happy from that perspective that we know they've come through. Flowing on to apply online and loan app is another thing, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. But we know at this point that the serviceability assessment has taken the income into account the way we want it to, and we're happy with that. Again, if we wanted to keep that, we just download that and save it as a file in the client's file section. Just let this one save and pop through. Again, pop the quote in. Now, sometimes a lot of brokers, when I say sometimes, a lot of brokers, so brokers will from time to time, I'll rephrase that sort of comment. Brokers from time to time will want to charge an additional fee for self-employed borrowers because of the extra analysis that they've got to go through. So you've got to do that quote. Remember, it's got to be signed or acknowledged before you can provide a preliminary assessment. If you know you're getting a self-employed client, you may well want to provide a quote up front so that they know when they provide their wad of self-employed paper, all their profit and loss and tax returns, that there's going to be a fee associated with you analysing all of that. So this quote document here is, if you want to generate it out of Podium, in the library, in the compliance section for your aggregator, there will be a Word templated quote that you can provide them, complete and provide them earlier. So it's worthwhile considering that, because there certainly is a lot more work involved in self-employed applications. There's not a lot more in terms of the process checklist items there. You'll see if I go into preliminary assessment, it's just going to be standard boilerplate processing for this down the bottom here of financial. Sorry, I guess the only thing worth probably taking into account here, over and above what you would with PAYG, and you would normally do an eye check on it, is making sure that the figures that are provided here, which the client is going to make an assessment on your recommendation, are accurate. It may well be that you might want to put some material changes comments in there regarding income if there's any variations that are pertinent to the client, and that the client obviously knows about, that you're highlighting to them, and they're obviously going to acknowledge by signing the preliminary assessment. So it's worth considering putting something in there. Requirements and objectives. I put in the specific features requested, I've put the major bank part here because that was a request. So by asking for the major bank, for example, they've eliminated 31 of the 35 lenders that I would have used. So it is important again that they sign this preliminary assessment and acknowledge that that was their request. And obviously we've got the double negative there to tick off. Again, if you want to make more changes to it, print Word, but remember PDF it. If you're happy with the end product here, then print PDF. Both ways, both buttons will put a copy of this document into your file section. I might just do one here just to show you. If I want to download it and save it somewhere else, I can. I'm going to get rid of that now. Save it. And then if I go across into the related, might have to give it a moment to update. Down. Hopefully we've got two files in there now. There's the prelim that we've just put in there. So a copy automatically goes across there. Okay, the final thing that we need to look at here in terms of self-employed discussion here on lodgement summary is making sure that your self-employed figures go across. It's probably a little bit more pertinent with the company and trust borrowings, but still, because it's not just a straight PAYG gross figure and tax that comes across, there's other components. It doesn't always map across properly because of the varying lender requirements. So once you get across in applying line, it may well be that you've got to re-input some of the figures, particularly around add backs, but you know, it's one of those things that we're constantly working on. Lenders are changing their policies on these, so particularly around add backs and what's acceptable and what isn't. It is important that you do double check that and make sure it goes through. I guess the only other comment worth making at this point is that particularly where you've analysed self-employed income and you've got notes to validate your reasoning behind the figures you've chosen, the way the lender treats it or analyses it may be different from what you have, and you've got to consider your analysis in terms of you and the client. And then apply it and see if it fits within the policies of those particular lenders or the lender that you want to refer it to. So it's a matter of standing by your assessment, handing it over through applying line to them or loan app, and then the lender will do what they want to do with the figures to fit within their criteria, and they'll communicate with you. Again, really important to stay in touch with the lender BDM on this and make sure that you know, if it's a little bit tricky and there's some explaining to do in terms of the deal, then talk to your lender BDM and get their support and endorsement for where you for the client that you're putting up to them. Okay, let me just come back across to our PowerPoint presentation. Again, I'm going to flick through a few of these because I covered off on these, but I want to make sure you guys will get a copy of this, as I said before. So just finally, we might just take a little break in a moment, but a couple of minute break, but make sure you understand the structure of the business, link the parties within Podium, so conveyancers, accountants, real estate, understand the viability of the business when analysing and recommending products. So trading trends, market forces, internal relationships. There's a lot more to consider with self-employed customers, just not the complexity of the documents and the profit and loss that you've got to look at, particularly when you're dealing with a couple of businesses. But it's also what's actually happening for that. Lender policies for self-employed and what you need to do if you've only got 1 year's figures. And we talked about add backs flowing through to serviceability and compliance documents. If we could just take a couple of minute break, I'm just going to check through the questions that have been sent through, and then we'll pop back into looking at creating the company record and company application for Franklin Investments Proprietary Limited. So just bear with me. Thank you. Just quickly, we will continue the couple of minute break, but I just wanted to say that some of the questions that come through, there's some good ones there, but they're a little bit complicated, particularly in terms of what's actually been asked in the question. So I'm going to have to leave some of them till after the webinar to sort of work through. I might even have to contact you just to run through what's actually being what the actual question is, but you know, I think the essence of some of the questions there are quite good. So that's probably just a quickie. Yes, you can put the client needs analysis that you generate in the process checklist straight into the files, so you can do that. Just quickly, someone's asked add backs interest. So yeah, you can add back interest, but what you've actually got to do is add back the liability associated with that interest component as well. So it might be, for instance, an overdraft. It's the interest. Rather than just take the overdraft liability directly out of the net profit. And then basically you're double dipping an interest charge if you don't add the interest back. So that's why it's there, but doesn't always apply. Doesn't always apply to all cases. Yeah, as I said, there's quite a number of questions here that are a little bit sort of a little bit longer and probably not that easy to decipher. So I'll park those. There's no other questions that I can sort of progress on at the moment. So let's have a couple of minutes and I'll be back with you for the company case study. just back now, so I think we've just had a couple of minutes break, so we might just continue on now. Some people might just join us in the next minute or two, but we'll proceed so we can stay on track for our time frame. So create the next part of our webinar is creating a company client and application record. So Franklin Investments Proprietary Limited, and I'll walk you through the case study that we're looking at here. So it's a fairly typical one if you're looking at a company as a borrower, is that Franklin Investments is a purposely created entity, so a special purpose vehicle to acquire an investment property for Cameron Franklin. So what's generally happening here is that the director wants particular assets divested from themselves and their company. So they create, as said, a special purpose vehicle. And in this case, it's just going to be the property's been acquired for long-term equity growth aiming towards retirement at 55. Being 32 or whatever it is, he's certainly thinking forward. He's married, a couple of kids, property in Penrith, savings, contents, all that sort of stuff, home loan and a credit card. He's looking to buy a property at Terrigal, want to borrow 480 on 600. Rent's going to be 750 a week. The loan product requirements are fixed rate, interest only, 25 years, split loan option, and again, a major bank to support ongoing business finance requirements. So what we're going to do is create a client record for Franklin Investments. Again, as I spoke to you before, if we look at the lead and what's and it's up to you guys, but it's probably better if you're starting, if you've got a lead for a company borrowing, you might just start the lead in the principal's name, and then do your conversion process and then create the company once you're in the client status. So that's probably the easy way to do it. Add assets, we're going to look at equity for the transaction and add company income. So again, the company income in these situations, because, and there's a couple of things that sort of put us outside the normal processing in the company borrowings are outside of NCCP, and being a special purpose vehicle, then it's basically a company starting from scratch and the sole purpose is the one transaction. So it's really just an injection of equity into a business to provide equity towards a particular transaction. And just get ourselves across to, okay, let's take yourself back. So we'll go back to the home page. We'll go to our client list then. So what I would normally do now is, if I'm starting off scratch, I would just start off as a new client. I've already created Franklin Investments. You can see it here. So I'll be referring back to that at different points through the scenario, just like I did with Cameron Franklin. But start off as new, and remember, this is the borrower. So this is a company record. So remember 2 weeks ago we did a webinar. Paula did a webinar on trusts, and I think she also talked about a company involved in that. But yeah, if she didn't, this is where you can fill in. It's company record, new company client, as it just popped through. Again, Franklin Investments could be, if there is a trading name, it might be, and it's not often, not really the case, but it might be that there's a trading entity and they're borrowing on a home loan basis. But that's probably more odd than common. Phone numbers, type, whether it's incorporated, limited, proprietary limited, all that sort of stuff. Again, ABNs, ARBNs, ACNs, they've got to be accurate for the record to save. So don't, if you haven't got them accurately or haven't got them, don't just put something in just to fill it in. Client ratings, client status active, referred by. Again, these are contacts that are already in the database. Description of what it is, so special purpose vehicle to purchase an investment property for long term. Number of directors, company description with corporation, etc. Registered, registration date, all these sort of things come in, so we're getting a real good knowledge of this business, and then we just go save. Now, the other thing I wanted to tell you about, so we've got Franklin Investments Proprietary Limited, and this is what we're going to end up with as a client record. The other thing worth thinking about is it's not just about residential home loans. So this is going to be to purchase a residential property, but you can actually keep your commercial clients, companies and self-employed in your database anyway. So you don't actually need, and I'll show you when we create an application, there's a lot of different types of applications you can create in here. Not that they go through Apply Online, obviously, but your database can be more than just a residential client. So think of Podium as more than just for your residential clients. This one might well be a commercial client, and that's all I've wanted in my database for. Again, the details have just come through from basically creating the record. When I get the right ABN and ACN and all that, I can edit, click the little pencil, edit it, and add them in. Obviously worth noting, legislative information, company information there. And it goes on. I've got my little panel over the side here again. Really important to remember those in terms of managing the client. When I go in through related, I've got a number of different tabs in here that are different from if I just had a straightforward residential. So a couple of things here. I can add my employees. So Franklin Investments was a bigger company. So it had 20 or 30 employees, and I actually had a couple of those employees as my clients as well. I can add them into this company record as an employee, but I have to create them as a contact beforehand. Okay, so what I would do in this case for Cameron Franklin, I'd create him as a contact, and I would marry him up to, in this case, and you saw before, I'm just going to open this in the new tab. In the clients, I had an account connection for Franklin Investments master list, which was there. I'll just pop through in a sec. So that's the master list, and when I pop across to related, I should see Cameron Franklin there, because that's what he's attached to. If I had a number of employees for Franklin Investments, I could link them all there as contacts. And then when I get across to, as I said, when I get across to the Franklin Investments client page, I can link them all as employees. Now, there's a couple of options with new employees. Predominantly, they're the management, but just general employees or other. And then I would just go through and so I've got no CAID. You'll see that CAID that I had as a contact before, that I added to Cameron Franklin's record as a guarantor. I don't have a contact record that I can attach for CAID, so I'd have to go through and create one for CAID to add him in as a new employee. But just so just so you know, you can have their employees listed in there. I'm going to come back to income in a second. Assets, I only got the asset I've got in there is the cash injection of 200,000 for the purposes of equity in the transaction to buy the property at Terrigal. No liabilities, no expenses. I haven't added in there at this particular point. I would have had files in there and notes, and I could put notes in there if that's what I wanted to. When I come back to income, I'll just scroll up. Income, it looks different from what a self-employed income does. So what the income for be a little connectivity. Just bear with me. Company is that firstly we have to select our years there, so we put 1 year at a time in here. So what we'll do is put in 2018-19 company profit before tax, and our add backs are sitting there, and any other income in there. I would suggest if you're adding other income, then you're going to have to need a note for what that is, but in this case there's nothing, because it's simply a special purpose vehicle, so the income is going to come through from the rent from the property we're buying. What I have done, once I complete this year, 2018-19, I just go save and new. It pops up again, and I just go the next year and put that in, save and new or save. But what I've done here, you'll see if I edit this, all I've done here is put in $1, and I've done that because when I get to servicing, I need to have a figure in there. Otherwise, it won't allow a servicing calculation to take place. So we'll just put $1 in for both years. And that way, it allows the servicing equation to occur. Now, if I scroll down here, there's one other, our next aspect, sorry, is the application. So my client record, albeit is quite limited compared to a normal PAYG or a self-employed client, because it's a special purpose vehicle, I will create an application. So again, I go new, Resi loan, but remember I said before, when you create a company record, it doesn't have to be for a Resi. So I can keep details of commercial loans in there, insurance, leases, all that sort of stuff. So if I was to pick on, I might just quickly do this just to show you. If I was to do a commercial loan, you'll see that the fields are all different, or a lot different from what a residential loan is. So we talk about subtypes. So that was the NAB one. If I scroll down a little bit further, and we get down into, sorry, let me just go back up. Let's put down SP, lead source. I'll go to primary purpose, and we'll just make, you'll see the purpose now for all the commercial ones are all related to business borrowings. Yeah, So they're not actually, they are specific to commercial loans. They're not actually residential loan applications or residential purposes. But I just normally go new residential loan. And then again, naming convention. I'll let that go because I'll show you what that is when I've created it, when we go onto the application record. Status again, discovery, substatus being compiled. Primary purpose is purchase. Remember, it's not investment, it's purchase. The purpose or the use of the property becomes investment. Settlement date, let's just plug in next Friday. Referrer contacts, and I put all those in as I did before. They've got to be in there. Exit description, special purpose vehicle, acquiring an investment property for long-term retirement plans for Cameron Franklin. Loan amount required, and then I'll just go save. And what I end up with is an application record that looks like this. Okay, so again, remember, application name is the same convention that I used for Franklin Investments as a purchase of an investment property at Terrigal, 480K and the month. And eventually, when I work out who the lender is, I can come back in and edit the name just there. And I can just put Westpac NAB, CBA, whatever it is on there. Again, there's nothing else here on this page that's different from what I would have already put in there before. But I can now pop across to the related tab. We got our borrower, Franklin Investments. If I wanted Franklin in, so I can add Cameron Franklin in. So Cameron Franklin, and I'll give him a guarantor for this if required, and then save, and he'll pop in here as a borrower connection there. So he's a guarantor. What that actually means is all his assets and liabilities will come across into the transaction as well. So when I eventually get it across in the reply line, I might eliminate some of those figures so it doesn't sort of cloud up the assessment of what the borrow is, but it will be available. I can send it through on a separate sheet that's available to give through assets, liabilities, income, expenses to say what's supporting the transaction. Probably at 80%, they're probably going to be okay with that anyway. Again, new related party connection. I can put in Henry again, solicitor, and then that'll come across into a related party there. So accountant and solicitor. So you can see all the assets are come across now for assets and liabilities for Cameron Franklin. I might just remove him just for the purposes of this demonstration. So that'll take out all the Cameron Franklin's info again. Okay, where I'll go from here, incomes come across. So dollar and dollar is what that is, no expenses. Product, I have a security here. Now what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to delete it because this is how for applications where it is a new investment property, so it's not an existing rental where they've already derived income from it. I don't list the security in here in the application stage. I don't list it because it doesn't. So I will add that security, and I'll get around to it through this process. I will add the security in the serviceability assessment. I'll show you how we do that. I haven't done any recommended scenarios or anything as yet, but we will work through that as we go. So now I've done everything in terms of the application. I am ready to process it. I've got my income. I can then go across and start working through the process checklist. Now, the important point here is, and as per my presentation, we'll see here about when I skip through, you'll see I've done all these already for you. Let me get through to the process checklist here. There's a couple of these here that, because it's a company application, it doesn't, NCCP doesn't apply. So the process isn't one that I have to follow or be compliant with NCCP with, but there is a number of components within the available broker tools that are necessary and handy for me to use for the company borrowing to process the application. So that's not to say that I can't present a company borrowing to a client on a preliminary assessment, or I can't do these documents for them. There's nothing to say you can't, but the purpose of it is to say that there are tools available here that are useful for processing the company application. First one is product search. So what I would do here is, it all gets populated through 480, 80%. Again, it's investment purpose, repayment, Victoria, all that. What I want to do firstly to show you is that I want to go across the favorite searches, and I might just go pick out the investor standard. Now, the important point to that is that the customer's requirements may be a little different to this, but this is a good starting point. So what it does, it just pre-populates. I've got to go back and just correct this. Interest only investment, we'll make it New South Wales, variable, full doc, and I might put in here whether or not I want a split loan option in there. And I then, if there's, go all, get rid of all, put in ANZ, find our nav again, and Westpac at the bottom. Got our 4. We'll search. We've got no products at the moment. We've got 26 to add. We've got 2 products already in the shortlist. So I've got a selection there that I want to, and it's largely because of the investor standard selection that I've picked there. So just know that, and there's a couple of others there, first home buyers, refinance, owner-occupier standard. So they're all, there's some standard searches in there that you can make use of as well, rather than trying to work out, oh, this is probably right for a first home buyer, this isn't. If they've got specific requirements, then some of them may align with products for that type of client, but some of them may not, and that's probably where you've got to have those conversations as to what features they can have for the type of loan that they want. Let's just go up to, sorry, I've just that one there. I'm just going to go across and do product shortlist again. I'm going to tick my 2, view product details, and again I'm going to take the shortcut here, go right down to the bottom. There's self-employed income there. Let me scroll back up. Company titles there. Let me just find the company. There was a company, sorry, it was the fees company and trust borrower fees. So it's important, even things like that, that you need to have a quick check on to make sure what's applicable to your particular products that you're assessing. Print it off if you want. It's probably not something you give to the client, but you just keep it as the broker so that you know what are the things that you need to consider in terms of your analysis. Okay, that's our product, simulation and comparison. Again, there's probably not a lot here. Again, remember, you don't have to do this. You may, it's not part of regulation, but it's something that you may want to do if you want to. Got ANZ, I might just add the Commonwealth Bank there. And then we got our two there. I think go through and put them through as our preferred and recommended. Again, it's worth the analysis to work out. Serviceability, this is our main one here in terms of the company borrowing. So remember I said I didn't add the security earlier because it won't flow through the serviceability assessment. So what I want to do here, I've got I'll update client information, that's okay. Got an ANZ product, my income $1 and $1, but I've got no security. So I want to add a security. So it's going to be investment, established rental income. I'll just do it as 800 a week. Our density will do medium, 100%. Security address. And now I've added my security. Make sure I'm still at non-income earning, and then I can do calculate. Now the purpose of it, it'll take that income into account in terms of the calculation. Again, do the lender calculator from the library as well to validate that. But that's, you can see that by adding the security in there, you'll see when I'll just do a save here. I'll just pop back out and I'll do a quick refresh. I'll go back to our client record. I'll jump into the related tab. And we should have a security property sitting there. And there's our security. So it flows backwards. So company. So that's the way you add that. So it goes into the servicing calculator. Back to process checklist. Again, quote, if you want to do your quote, as I said before, this is the Podium generated one. If you want to do one earlier in the piece and let them know that you've got a fee for processing a company application, then have a look at guidance note number 7 in the library, in the compliance library. There is a Word document there that you can do up and provide to the client. Any confusion on when and where and all that to do with issuing a quote, see your compliance partner, whether that's QED or whether it's Blesser, whoever it is, see them and they'll be able to advise you on that. Again, preliminary assessment not necessary, but if you want to present it to the client on that basis, then you would do that as well. Now the lodgement summary is the part there that's we need to sort of have a little bit of a conversation about, because it's not for company borrowings and trusts. In terms of apply online, there is some mapping issues there, and it's not just add backs, it's income and other data as well. So what that basically means in apply online is that if you are sending one through there, you have to go into apply online and re-add some of those fields back in because they might not carry across. And a lot of that's to do with just the mapping of data between Podium and the lenders, and obviously having so many lenders that don't or that have different requirements, and some have got complex platforms that don't map well, all that sort of stuff. So we're actually working with NextGen at the moment to rectify that. From a Simpology perspective, LoanApp have at the moment they've disabled company and trust applications, so you can't get them. You wouldn't be putting them through LoanApp anyway. So that's just in case you don't know, they have disabled that. And that is really about it. I might just take a couple of quick questions, see if there are any here just in relation to company. Just to answer one of the questions, the security is only loaded in serviceability where there's rental income, because it's allowing the rental income to actually exist within the serviceability calculator. So that's the only way the rental income gets in there. If it's just the normal security for a company borrowing that's not relying on the rental, then you just add it in the normal security tab in the application or client page. Again, there's probably a few questions here that are probably a little bit more involved than just the standard, and probably need to then just sort of work through now. I probably need to contact the people to work through them. And again, once I've sorted them out, I will provide a detailed explanation of them when we get in there. But other than that, we seem to be okay on questions. Let me just pop back to our presentation, and we'll just keep working that. So again, you'll get a copy of this, and we've already run through some of these scenarios. So just that's right. If you are going to issue a preliminary assessment, make sure that you check the current proposed income expenses scenario. In terms of tips for creating company clients, again, same as self-employed, check the structure, link to parties, understand the viability of the business, be aware of the lender policies for companies, add the investment security properties under purchase so that the income can flow through, do the lender's serviceability calculator, which is in the library. Compliance documents don't need to be completed for company borrowings, but check with your compliance partner if you want to go down that path anyway, simply for a way of explaining it better to the client. You may feel that works. If you are using the compliance documents and you want to add more to them or change them, remember, print Word and then make your changes and save PDF and then store that in the file. And as I said just then, in terms of company and trust data, at the moment, LoanApp isn't accepting any applications through their platform for company and trust, and there are mapping issues, and they vary from transaction to transaction and lender to lender. So just be aware of that for apply online, and just re-enter any data back into apply online at that point when you're in that process. And that's fairly much it. Like I said, I'll stay online for a bit afterwards anyway, and you can fire through some other questions. I'm just going to cover off on some resources that you really should look at when looking at self-employed and company, and that's the client accountant. They'll understand the structure. Don't be afraid to call them and, back your professionalism, work out what you want to ask beforehand. The accountant will tell you what the situation with the business is, because you never know, an accountant might be looking for a broker they can refer business to as well. So there are opportunities in it. I know some brokers don't like contacting accountants, but it's a necessary evil in a lot of cases. The other thing is just let the client know beforehand that you intend to ring them. They'll authorise you to do that. Sometimes the accountant might even say, "I'll just check with the client first, and then I'll give you a ring back." Lender BDM, important for these types of clients, because not all lenders treat and assess self-employed company income the same. A great source of help, source for helping structure of applications. Podium Knowledge Hub is the other one that you need to look at. So I didn't intend to demonstrate Podium Knowledge today, but on the left-hand menu of your homepage is Podium Knowledge Hub. You can go in where it's got ask a question there. You can put in keywords there, and don't just put in stuff like application or client. Be a little bit more specific, because it picks up those the specific words better than generic words. If you were to put in application, you might get 5 pages of articles, which isn't going to help you. So be a little bit specific in terms of what you put in there. You can see from the screen there's a number of different categories anyway that you can look into. So try and be a bit targeted when you go into Podium Knowledge Hub, and don't sort of just go in there and think that it's just going to present itself just by putting in client or application. Podium Support is a great help. They're particularly helpful for things like company and trust or self-employed flowing through to apply online. They're across a lot of the issues that are day-to-day in the processing of these applications. So there might be some issues with loan app and company and trust applications at the moment, but in a week or two that might be fixed, and Podium Support are going to know about that. So they're really helpful if you are stuck in those situations. Have a go at it first if it's apply online that you're having some difficulty with, and then give them a ring. After that's your partnership manager. They might be of great assistance to you. Maybe some general deal structuring. That's probably best with BDM, lender BDMs. But in terms of lender selection and where your guidance is to help you understand these type of clients, they're a great resource for you. They might be able to point you in the right direction, particularly, like I said before, about your peers. So if there's other brokers that you know that are quite proficient in self-employed and company lending, then they will be able to help you with the analysis of the financials and potentially what lenders are the best ones to line up with. And then finally, you've got us, the Podium training team. So your questions, any questions that you have out of this webinar or just general training, you can send through to us, and we will do our best to help you. What have we done today? We've become familiar with creating a self-employed client record in Podium, a company record in Podium. We've also used case studies to understand how to create applications for both of them through to Podium for lodgement, and we've just had a look at what resources are available to you. As I said before, we'll give you copies of these slides along with any FAQs, and the FAQs are all the questions that have come out of today's webinar. Obviously, I'll eliminate all the ones that are telling me that you couldn't hear me or see me. But there, as I said, there's a couple or quite a few questions there that I'm probably going to need to go back to people on to get a better understanding of what they're asking. And then you'll get that along with the presentations. I'll break the presentation up into two. one for self-employed and one for company, so that it's easier for them to navigate through them rather than being one big presentation. Know your communication channels for support and feedback, and get familiar with WalkMe resources and Podium. WalkMe is down the bottom left-hand corner of the Podium home screen, so you can just click in there and take tours and get more familiar with Podium. I'd also, as I said, encourage you to look at the Sarah Buckman video series because there's a lot of detailed tips in there about creating clients and processing applications, particularly NCCP related or regulatory related. So make sure that you also look at those if you haven't. And last fortnight's trusted webinar is also very helpful for you in terms of linking in with this webinar and others. You'll get 2.5 CPD points for Dave for both MFAA and FBAA. We'll send out the codes to you later. You can record it in your CPD registers without a code, but if you wanted to complete your register in its entirety, the codes will be available to you shortly. Like I said, we're probably, I said about 2.5 hours. We've got about 15 minutes left. I'll stay online for that 15 minutes and I'll take any questions. I'll come across any questions there and see if I can even start coming back to you privately through the questions section to answer or clarify some of those queries that you may have. So I'll just pop it on mute now and I'll sit here and I'll be waiting. But I'd like to thank you for your tolerance in the early part of the webinar where the screen share and sound wasn't working well or at all. But also hopefully you got a lot out of today's webinar and it was useful for you in terms of your self-employed clients particularly, and helps you understand a little bit more and creates more efficiency with processing those applications. So thank you again for your attendance, and like I said, I'll stay online. Thank you.